Welcome back to Making a Murder, my journal, Christmas special. So, I've never done a Christmas special. I'm excited to do this with you. And Zellner had given us kind of, as she said, an early Christmas present. So, I've saved mine to open with you. Let's get started. Making a Murder update, Avery's lawyer files motion for new testing of bones in the case. I could not wrap one more Christmas present until I was able to wrap my mind around these bones. And so I've done in my journal to be able to understand where we're sitting in the current motion that was filed by Zellner with the court system. So she has found an expert named Richard Selden, who founded a company that provides rapid DNA services. Richard Selden, a DNA expert, is willing to test the bones found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit to see whether it can be determined once and for all whether the fragments belong to the murder victim, Teresa Halbach. Zellner sent out a couple tweets, and we scooped them up. So let's get right to it. And she says, actually, we just filed a motion this afternoon asking the appellate court to remand the case for testing to take place. And here is her filing, and you can see there the date is December 17, 2018. So there's her Christmas present to us. Now, she wasn't supposed to file till December 20th, but this was completely different. So December 20th was regarding enough evidence that we felt with new information to request that there be an evidentiary trial, where the evidentiary trial we would be able to examine all the evidence to see if it warranted a new trial and what the courts would rule. However, surprise, surprise, now that we have this new DNA ability to test bones, she actually jumped ahead of that 20th and filed on the 17th. Now, this is where we're trying to figure out what happens to the 20th one, because that was a hardcore deadline there that we had to meet. So here we go. So here she filed it, and you can see that this is at the Wisconsin court system. Now, you can look this site up, and you can stay aware of each thing that's happening in this court case. It's a Supreme Court and Court of Appeal Access website. The Rapid DNA ID now has authorized to be entered into CODIS. It will revolutionize DNA testing in the United States. So let's stop right there a minute. CODIS is an extremely reliable source. This is where you get into a national data bank based on your DNA, and that gives you an identity. So being that this is at that level, this is superb. All right, let's continue reading. The bones were sent to the FBI, and they were unable to test them because of their degraded condition, so he recognized their identity of the bones was important evidence. The Attorney General had agreed to microscopic examination of the bones in 2017, so we know that they realized the identity of the bones is important. She added, this evidence the state used to convict Stephen Avery of the murder. The state defines what the relevant to the conviction, and we attempt to refute it. At the time of Avery's trial, she wrote, the technology did not exist, and the FBI was unable to test the bones because of their degraded condition in 2006. She said she believed 99% of the bones are Halbach's. So here we go. Let's unwrap this really big time here. Stephen's lawyer is unraveling this case. Indeed. So back at trial at the time, we're going to jump back a little bit into 2007. Well, actually, it would have been 2005 that these bones came up, and then in trial in 2007. And these are bone fragments, and they were found in the burn pit behind Steve Avery's garage on November 8, 2005, 3 days after Halbach's car was found on the lot. Now, this is actually not Steve Avery's burn barrel. This is actually a burn barrel that originated from the Yonda property, which is his sister's. So, former prosecutor Ken Kratz said that because it couldn't be shown the bones were human, that he wasn't going to spend 20 seconds on them. We believe the identity of the bones as Mrs. Halbach's will cause the case to be reversed for a new trial. And that's the biggest news. So let's see here. This is the original burn site, they said. And that was claimed by their expert, Dr. Eisenberg. And she said that the bones were burned, according to her, behind the garage at Stephen Avery's. Now, if we're seeing multiple burn sites and piles in other locations, but we don't check those, what are we comparing the original, quote unquote, original burn site to? So that's where I take my stance is, if we haven't checked the other places, how do we know they are actually not the original burn site? Which then you would not have a killer go out of his way to get rid of the evidence and then bring parts of it home and hide it right there. Not even really hide it, but very surface hide it on the top of the soil there behind the garage. It doesn't make sense. So it goes on to say, we discovered there were 3 bone piles in Manitowoc County gravel pit, not just one. They all have human bone in them. Interesting. So there were human bones in those other piles. Beauty maintained there was a third site. Let's see here. There's actually 3 different sites where human or possible human bones were found. Clearly evident human bones were found in the burn pit, and clearly undisputed human bones were found in the burn barrel, but there's also this mysterious quarry site a quarter of a mile or so away. Now see, nobody seemed to hear about that. All right. Beauty noted that the quarry pit fragments were all burned to the same degree with the same amount of calcinogen. And he said much was unknown about them. So we've used the coordinates latitude, longitude, and somebody has been very kind and they've made a map for us. And I just Googled it, you guys, so you can probably do this too. But this is the locations, and we did check them, and that was correct. So you can see the salvage yard up at the top. And then you can see these other locations are quite close to County Road Q over here at the what would be, I guess, considered the south edge of the map. That's the purpose of the new DNA testing. The state forensics anthropologist opined that some of the gravel pit bones were human and some were suspected human. The court can order the release of the bones for DNA testing. And Zellner tweeted, this will prove the murder and mutilation occurred in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, and the bones were planted in Mr. Avery's burn pit to frame him. We're available to take your questions. Read this news starting at 2:30 p.m. CDT. So she actually followed up with a huge question and answer series of tweets, and those are my favorite, by the way. I'm sure they are yours too. I brought up this picture, just kind of threw it out there because a lot of people in the past would try to explain to me how this dog here, this beautiful animal, this German Shepherd, was actually Bear and that he guarded this pit. But the truth of the matter is this is not Bear. This dog is wearing a vest that belongs to a worker. And so this is a worker dog, and this is after the pit had been excavated. And I find it interesting that if you blow it up, you've got like brush unburned. Yeah, we'll just leave that picture. When the defense attorney, okay, we're going to jump back into the case itself during trial, and let's talk. We're having conversations between the defense attorney and Dr. Eisenberg, the specialist or expert for prosecution on the bones. When the defense attorney asked Eisenberg, now you suspected them of being human pelvic bone. Am I understanding you correctly? She said yes and called them suspected possible bones, or suspected human, possibly human. She said the measurement of the bone in humans is less than that of the deer bone, which is why she suspected they might be human. She said the features she was seeing were consistent with an adult female human skeleton, but she couldn't say for sure. The barrel known as the Yonda burn barrel contained the spine, shoulder blade, leg bones, and arm bones. Eisenberg testified that she thought the primary burn site was behind Avery's garage in the burn pit, though not in the Yonda burn barrel and not somewhere else, court records showed. Asked whether the bones could have been moved to the burn pit, She said she would have seen more or seen some. Let me reread that. She said she would have seen breakage, but didn't. And then she said, based on the volume of human bone fragments behind the garage, I find it highly unlikely that was not the primary burn location, she testified. So she used a double negative, meaning that she finds it hard to believe that it would be elsewhere. So yes, she is agreeing that her statement is that the burn pit behind the garage would be primary. Little double talk there on her part. Boy, boy. You have never seen a photograph of what the site looks like and what the bones look like, and neither have I, said Buting. Eisenberg admitted that by the time she got the bones, she was unable to determine important information about its location, how it was sited, and not only was nobody called to the scene, but there were no photographs. Of the 8 bone fragments that showed suspect cut marks, one definitely non-human, she added. That meant that some non-human bones were also burned, in addition to the ones that could be human. In the end, only 3 fragments could be human, testified Eisenberg according to the court transcripts. The defense also called its own expert, who found serious problems with how the bones were collected overall. Buting suggested to the jury that somebody else burned Teresa Halbach's body elsewhere, maybe in the quarry, maybe somewhere else. They used the burn barrel that was found on the Yonda property as a container to transport the remains, as many as they could scoop up into Mr. Avery's backyard. And they dumped it into the burn pit or scattered it about, and they inadvertently left a few behind. This is most likely happening in the dark. In his closing argument, Jerome Buting, the defense attorney at trial, said these bones were moved. He said the prosecution had no explanation why human bones, would be found in Yonda burn barrel some 15 feet away from the burn pit. So let's stop right there and try to understand this. So if the original site is right there, burned behind the garage, and then most of the bones are there, we're looking at, large portions of bones. We've got shoulder blades and all kinds of things. They wouldn't have left half the bones there if they're moving them. So in this situation, it makes no sense that we would be finding bones elsewhere. State's theory is based on location of evidence and linked to S.A. Number 1, bullet is in S.A.'s garage. Number 2, bone in S.A.'s burn pit. Number 3, key in S.A.'s trailer. 4, phone, etc. in S.A.'s burn barrel. 5, RAV4 on S.A. property. State fought the idea of T.H.'s bones in Manitowoc County gravel pit or RAV off of the Avery salvage yard. Interesting. It refutes the state's case that the murder occurred in the garage and the burning occurred in the burn pit. Our job is to deal with the evidence that is presented, not what somebody dreams up 13 years later, Zellner wrote. Of course, the state could still contend that Avery murdered Halbach off-site and moved her bones to the salvage yard property, but that's not what was argued at trial. Stop there. Now, if he murdered her off-site, and obviously that would be to not incriminate himself, he would not then turn around in theory and bring them back onto his own property, let alone put these bones in his own backyard. Eisenberg was also asked to look at the mysterious evidence packet with the tag number 8675. The plastic lidded container bone. Okay, let's repeat that. The plastic lidded container bore some. I cannot read this morning. I apologize. One more try. The plastic lidded container bore small bone fragments recovered from one of the quarry pits southwest of Avery's property. These are the bones Zellner now wants tested. So you can see them sifting through debris here and ash. This was back in 2005, just a little before Christmas at that time. And they're really using some little tiny fragments to collect out of this ash to find if there's any bones. So that's pretty high carcinogen to be able to burn those bones to where they're cremated as though they had been cremated in a funeral home. The evidence packet with tag 8675 contained a total of 13 bone fragments. Some of those Eisenberg was able to determine were non-human unburned bones. However, 8 fragments were burned, 10 fragments had cut marks. The charring and calcined condition of the burned fragments were similar to the human bone fragments in the Yonda burn barrel and behind Avery's garage, Eisenberg said. Huh. So those came from the quarry, I would guess, one of the quarries. She identified a bone she suspected of being from the iliac crest, 2 fragments that appeared to be the pelvic bones. Bone was burnt to the point of being calcined. She said these bones showed evidence of cut marks and a saw cut. They were too fragile to survive tests to determine whether they were animal or human. Brendan's confession was coerced. Why would Stephen bring bones from the gravel pit and then bring them back to his own burn pit? Why would he bring any bones to or from the gravel pit? Wrote Zellner. Of the new technology, she wrote, yes, it just obtained FBI approval and has been successfully used in identifying California wildfire burn victims. If the bones in the gravel pit were proven to be Hawbuck's, it would blow a hole in the state's narrative at trial as to how the murder occurred, which could even better news for Dassey than Avery, because Dassey's conviction was largely based on a confession he gave as a juvenile, asserting that he and his uncle murdered Hawbuck in Avery's trailer. Dassey's attorney and previously a federal magistrate judge and appellate court panel argued the confession was wrongfully obtained, but the full appellate court disagreed and upheld Dassey's conviction. Both men are still in Wisconsin prisons today. Now, it was interesting. I was actually creating this video and I had to restart it because I got a tweet from Jerome Buting, and this tweet was exactly what we needed, and I needed it in here. So last year, Gain, I'm not sure how to say his name. Now, he's a very important gentleman, though. He criticized Milwaukee police for destroying biological evidence in 1994, 7 years before evidence retention laws were passed. Yet he agreed to the CASO, giving all the bones to the Hawbucks in 2011, 10 years after law enacted. What? Okay, so we just got a message from Buting that the bones were given to the actual victim's family while we're still investigating this trial. I understand and respect that they want the remains to bury. I truly do understand that. But at the same time, we have 2 individuals that are still trying to prove their innocence. And with their track record of, last time they had it wrong. The state had it completely wrong. And so now we're looking at a lot of mystery, a lot of questions with the track record. I think we'd want the bones on hand. So let's see if there's any laws. He mentioned this retention law. So we've looked it up on the Wisconsin legislature. And you can look that up under docs. Legaswisconsin.gov. And so this is a statute 968.205, preservation of certain evidence. Now these get lengthy and boring, so I'm just going to kind of give you the idea. It's on the screen. You can definitely look it up yourself as well as read it here. We're going to read about this section. Custody means actual custody of the person under a sentence of imprisonment, custody of a probationer, parolee, or person on extended supervision by the Department of Corrections. And then it continues on. So this is somebody held in custody. Do Brendan and Stephen qualify? Yes, they are in custody. Discharge date is another part of this law that matters, and it says discharge date means the date on which a person is released or discharged from custody that resulted from a criminal action, a delinquency procedure under, and it kind of goes on and on. So they have not had a discharge date, and so we do not have a release legally of the bones according to these documents from what I'm understanding. So we're going to go ahead and dig into subsection 2. It says, except as provided in, I think it means I don't even know. We'll just call it sub 3. If physical evidence that is in the possession of the law enforcement agency includes any, and it says any, biological material that was collected in connection with a criminal investigation that resulted in criminal conviction, delinquency, abduction, or commitment under section, and the biological material is from a victim of the offense that was the subject of the criminal investigation, or may reasonably be used to incriminate or exculpate any person for the offense, the law enforcement agency shall preserve the physical evidence until every person in custody as a result of the conviction, abduction, or commitment has reached his or her discharge date. Okay, so according to this law, if I'm reading it correctly, if I'm understanding it correctly, it is stating that these bones needed to remain into protection by the state. Let's read the second part. A law enforcement agency shall retain evidence to which subject applies in an amount and manner sufficient to develop the DAP as defined in this section from the biological material contained and included on evidence. Again, same thing. So that's interesting because I did research what Mr. Beauty is talking about, and we have a note here, an actual Calumet County Sheriff's Department note, 9/20/2011, and this was the reporting officer was Jeremy Hawkins, and it says 9/20/11, approximately 9:00 a.m. I, Deputy Jeremy Hawkins of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, along with Sergeant Mark Wiegert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, Attorney Felon, and here goes the name we were hearing, Attorney Norm Gain, removed from evidence all property tag numbers that contained human bones. Wow. Attorney Gaughan and Attorney Felon viewed the items under the property tags and, along with Dr. Leslie Eisenberg report, determined which bones could be returned to the Halbach family. Now, there's a significant amount of these bones returned, but there's some issues with these bones. And why are they giving them bones that have not been determined as the Halbachs? Okay, and that's a big question. So we've got some underlining here, and you see tag 7924, unidentified material suspect to be bones, unidentified material charred, unknown material suspected to be bone. This one, suspected bone fragments, and it goes on. Here we have a huge list. Now, this list is really interesting because this one comes with, I believe, like 6 of these. We'll just count them. They're possible bone fragments. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, sorry about that, 5, 6, I believe. And they were returned to the Halbachs. And it does show that the Wiegert, or I'm sorry, I always say Wiegert, it's a Whiting Funeral Home, did sign for these. Now, it's interesting because that really has me confused. If we go back to a previous video we did on Teresa, Carmen, and Ricky, I believe it was part 2, and we're working on the death certificate. We do have that Whiting Funeral Home signing for them, as they're stating here, on 2011. But on that, they're signing, I believe, in February of 2006. Or no, we need to review that. It might have been November 10th, 2005 on the death certificate. But here, they're stating that the Whiting Funeral Home, in the presence of Mark Wiegert and myself, they were transferred to them. It doesn't say that they signed for them. It just says they were transferred to them. So maybe that explains a little bit more of that death certificate. Maybe at that time they knew absolutely the Whiting Funeral Home was going to be receiving the remains when they were released. And maybe this put a little bit of that together. So I don't know. It's just a point to bring up for reference. And then we have a little Tweety bird here, and this person has wrote this up, and it says, unless I've made a boo-boo, some of these items returned to the Hall box are in Casey's motion to test with rapid DNA. What? So are you, what she's claiming here, and we're going to go ahead and check, but this little rubber ducky has said that KZ is requesting the bones that Hallbox may have buried. So let's dig in a little bit. We have a huge list here of the CASO pages that list out the property tags here. And these were given on September 20th, 2011 via the Whiting Funeral Home. And there's a list of the bones numbered by their property tags. And then if you look down below, we'll get a little bigger. It says, KZ has asked for these items to be examined from the Manitowoc County pit piles. And then she lists out numbers. So let's look here. We have 7411. So 7411, yep, they were given to the Hall box. 7412, Hall box, have them. I don't see 7413 that we need. Okay, so we probably still have that. 7414 and 7416, 7419. Yep, those three all been given to the Hall box. We need those for testing. And I don't see any other matches. So there's a significant amount. And she goes on to say, yeah, there's 5 different overlapping numbers that Hallbox have. And as she puts, have I read this right? Is KZ going to want to exhume remains? And were they buried? Great, great tip from somebody that put their thoughts, their thinking cap on that, and we appreciate the work. She went on to back it up, which is highly appreciated, and she has pulled up the actual document here that shows that these items actually have a definition to them and tell where they were found. So the first item, 7411, is calcined human bones fragments, possibly cut edges. And then we're going to slide way over across this top area, and you can see quarry pile number 3. Wait a minute. Stop right there. Let me understand this. So the prosecution, the state of Wisconsin, had determined, and this is what the Hallbox went on, the victim's family went on, was the prosecution said that Steve Avery murdered Teresa and burned her in the pit behind his garage. And then they went on to state, King Kratz himself, he was the prosecutor, he said, we're not going to spend even 20 seconds on the bones out there because they're not relevant to the case. We didn't even get to test them to see if those were the original burn sites to do any comparison. Yet, those non-relevant bones that they claimed were not Teresa Hallbox are now being given to the Hallbox as their remains of their daughter, Teresa Hallbach. And that came from Quarry 3. I just want to get my mind around it. All right, let's keep going. 7412, human and non-human bone. Quarry pit 1. No, 2. Did I jump a page? I think we jumped a page. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that one was 1. And then the next one is 2 from the bottom. Quarry pit 3, and that one also burned calcined human bone fragment. That doesn't even say questionable. That says it is. That came from there. 7416 human bone fragment. Human is calcined with cut mark edge 3. Yeah, that one came from Quarry 2. Cut, burned human bone. So, what does this all mean with what we were talking about for the court case? Now, I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit. Let's kind of go back over just a few of the facts. So we know that we have Dr. Selden has approved that he will do the testing for the bones if the state releases the bones to Zellner. She's asking for the bones from the state in her motion on December 17th. We have found out, according to Buting, that these bones have been given to Habak. We actually found the Calumet County Sheriff's Department paperwork where 5 of the bones that we need to test for this have been given to the Habaks, the victims' parents and family. Did they bury them? Do we have to exhume them? I'm not sure. We did have that motion on the 20th. And what has occurred is that the result from the 20th evidentiary request is this. Until we hear back from the state if we get to test the bones or not, we're on a holding pattern. We're just going to stay here. Once the state answers, and they have all the time they want. Once they answer, if they answer, yes, we can have the bones, then most likely they will issue a stay on the evidentiary hearing until those bones are tested. However, if they say, yes, no, you cannot test these bones, we're not going to let you, which right there, I think most of America would be like, why? There'd be no justification unless, in my personal opinion, my humble opinion, they're hiding something. So if they say no, then unfortunately we would have 3 days to get back into that motion to file for the evidentiary hearing and get that going. So I'm not a lawyer. I want to make that clear. I'm not a paralegal. I'm just a person just like you. Nobody's special. I do my own research and I try to put it in a digestible method, I guess, for all of us. So I appreciate you guys very much for watching. Please hit that like button so that I keep doing these. They are a lot of work, and I want to know that this is helping Stephen and Brendan with public awareness. And I love your comments, you guys. I must have the most supportive people in the world because I think that the world really does care a lot about these guys. We know they were innocent. We know that they've been sitting there, and, it breaks my heart to think Brendan is sitting there another year away from his family at Christmas when, everything that they asked him to say he didn't mean was true. And, have you ever heard of a killer say, hey, now can I go back to 6th period and finish my project, please? Okay, sorry about the tears, but it's Christmas Eve and I'm thinking of them in jail and in prison this long, and it hurts. So, the good news is, thank God for Zellner. I'm sorry, I've really gotten choked up. Let me grab a drink real quick. Sorry about this. She is giving us the bright to the tunnel here. We are going to get through this with Zellner's help. And if you didn't do the crime, you shouldn't sit the time. Thanks for watching. If you would like some updates on this, please subscribe. And if you hit that little bell, it'll ring when I put out a new update. And that way we can stay on the same page as we go through the journal. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Whatever your tradition is, please take care of yourself and know that I love you guys from the bottom of my heart. And keep afloat. Bye, guys. Thank you.